Why did the room go quiet the moment she sat down at the briefing table? It wasn't respect, not yet. It was confusion. 23 chairs, 22 men already seated, jokes half finished, coffee cooling in paper cups, someone mid-laugh. Then she entered and the air shifted, not sharply, not loudly, but enough to be noticed, enough for glances to flick upward and linger a beat too long. She didn't apologize for being late. She wasn't late. She moved with the unhurried economy of someone who had learned long ago that rushing only made mistakes louder. Her boots made almost no sound on the concrete floor. Her shoulders were relaxed, not slouched, not stiff, balanced, like everything else about her. Someone whispered, "Who's that?" Another voice, quieter, carried a trace of disbelief. "She's with us." She took the empty chair near the end of the table, didn't reach for the briefing packet, didn't touch the pen, just folded her hands once and waited. Captain Morales cleared his throat and resumed speaking, but the rhythm was off now. He stumbled over a sentence, corrected himself, tried again. His eyes slid toward her without permission, then snapped back to the map projected on the wall. The name on the roster said Vance, A. The age column said 42. Someone near the back leaned in and muttered, "That can't be right." It was right. She felt the looks, she always did. She had learned not to react to them the way most people did. No tightening of the jaw, no defensive posture, no silent plea to be accepted. Those reactions fed the wrong thing. They made people lean in harder. So she did nothing. The desert base sat far from anything worth nomming. No town, no horizon that meant home, just dust, wind, and the kind of silence that pressed against your ears at night. The place existed to strip people down to essentials: skill, endurance, judgment. Everything else was excess. They were here for selection, not the kind that came with banners or speeches, the kind that quietly erased names from a list. Someone across the table finally said what everyone else was thinking. "Ma'am, are you lost?" A few suppressed smiles. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. She turned her head slowly, met his eyes, not challengingly, not submissively, just present. "No," she said. Her voice was low, calm, used sparingly. "I'm exactly where I was told to be." The room didn't laugh. Not fully. Something about the way she said it closed the door on humor. The captain cleared his throat again. "All right, focus up, wheels up in 12. As the briefing resumed, she studied the map, not the red lines or objective markers, but the negative space between them. The distances people underestimated, the places where plans usually went wrong. Her name echoed faintly in her head, as it always did when she sat in rooms like this. Vance. It wasn't the name she was born with. It wasn't even the second one. Names were tools. This one had served her well. When the briefing ended, the room erupted back into noise. Chairs scraped. Conversations overlapped. A few people stood deliberately close to her, as if proximity might explain her presence. Lieutenant Raskin finally stopped in front of her. Tall, young, built like confidence was a permanent state. His patch was new. His eyes were sharp in the way that came from believing the world hadn't tested him yet. "Specialist Vance," he said, reading directly from her chest. "You know this isn't a refresher course, right?" She looked up at him, blinked once. "Yes." "That pipeline breaks people half your age." "Yes." He waited for more, an explanation, a defense, something to push against. Nothing came. He scoffed softly. "Just saying, would hate to carry dead weight." A younger soldier nearby laughed a little too loudly. She stood, slung her pack over one shoulder, and stepped past him. As she did, she spoke, not to his face, not to the group, but to the open air between moments. "Then don't," she said. No edge, no threat, just a statement released and forgotten. Outside, the heat hit like a held breath finally exhaled. She paused long enough to adjust the strap of her pack, then walked toward the transport trucks. Each step grounded, each movement deliberate. She could already feel it starting, the familiar pressure, the slow build of scrutiny and disbelief, the unspoken assumption that she was an error someone would correct soon enough. She welcomed it. Underestimation was a kind of shelter. The first days were designed to erase comfort. Sleep came in fragments, meals disappeared into noise, orders contradicted each other on purpose, people snapped at shadows, tempers flared. She stayed quiet. During physical assessments, she never won outright, never dominated. She placed where she needed to place, strong enough to pass, invisible enough to be ignored. On the range, her groupings were tight, too tight once. She adjusted after that, let one round drift, gave them something ordinary to look at. At night, while others complained or boasted or called home, she sat on her bunk and cleaned her gear with ritual care. Not out of obsession, out of respect. A young private named Calloway noticed. He was from a farm somewhere flat and endless. He had learned to watch animals instead of talking over them. "You've done this before," he said quietly one night. She didn't look up. "Everyone here has." He shook his head. "Not like that." She paused, just long enough to acknowledge the truth without feeding it. Then she resumed her work. The instructors noticed her in a different way, not admiration, suspicion. Sergeant Thorne made a point of singling her out, correcting her stance, her grip, her footwork. "You're slow," he barked during drills. "This isn't yoga." She adjusted, not because he was right, but because he needed to believe he was. Each night, exhaustion settled into her bones like an old friend. Her body carried its history quietly. The injuries that never fully healed, the losses that no longer screamed but still breathed. She slept lightly, always had. On the fifth day, combat training began. The mats smelled like old sweat and newer arrogance. Thorne paced like a storm looking for somewhere to break. "This is where people show who they really are," he shouted. "No hiding, no excuses." She stepped onto the mat barefoot, felt the texture under her feet, let her breath settle. Across from her stood a man half her age, twice as loud. He came at her fast, sloppy, angry. She redirected him, took him down cleanly, let him stand back up. No one clapped, no one laughed. Thorne frowned. Something shifted. Later, alone in the locker room, she stared at her reflection. The gray at her temples caught the fluorescent light. Lines mapped her face like quiet terrain. She traced the faded tattoo on her wrist with her thumb, the ghost. A reminder of things that never made it into files, of orders never written down, of people who existed only in memory. She had buried that life carefully, on purpose. But places like this had a way of digging. And somewhere deep in the base, someone was beginning to realize that the rookie they thought they'd break had already been broken once before and survived. Sometimes strength doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it sits down quietly at the end of the table and waits. Why did Sergeant Thorne stop the drill halfway through and stare at her like something didn't add up? No one else noticed it at first. The recruits were too busy sucking air, wiping sweat from their eyes, trying to stay upright. The desert heat pressed down like a hand on the back of the neck. Muscles trembled, pride thinned. But Thorne noticed. He always did when something challenged the shape of his world. They were running close-quarters movement, two-man entries, fast transitions, controlled aggression. The younger soldiers attacked the drills like it was a competition. Speed over balance, force over thought. They collided with doorframes, overcommitted, corrected too late. She didn't. She moved last in the stack as if she belonged there by instinct. When the breach came, she flowed through the doorway instead of bursting through it. Her weapon stayed level, her foot placement silent. She checked corners without rushing them like she already knew what would, or wouldn't be there. Thorne raised his hand. Freeze. Everyone stopped. He walked toward her slowly, eyes narrowing, looked at her stance, the angle of her shoulders, the way her weight was distributed, not forward like he taught, but centered, ready to shift. That's not the method, he said. She nodded once. No, Sergeant. The room waited for the rest. It didn't come. His jaw tightened. Then why are you doing it? She met his gaze, calm as still water. Because it works. A ripple went through the room. Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else smirked, waiting for her to get crushed. Thorne leaned in, his shadow falling across her. You think you know better than the program? No. Then why? Because the program assumes chaos, she said evenly. And this drill doesn't have any yet. Silence. It wasn't defiance. That was the problem. It was observation, thought, a quiet certainty that didn't ask permission. Thorne straightened, laughed once sharp and humorless. Run it again my way. Yes, Sergeant. She adjusted. She still finished clean. That night her shoulders ached in the way that meant she'd pushed just enough. She sat on the edge of her bunk, boots unlaced, staring at the floor. Around her, the barracks hummed with low conversation. Someone was telling a story too loudly. Someone else was complaining about blisters. Calloway sat across from her, lacing his boots. He hesitated. They're watching you now, he said. She gave a small nod. They always do, eventually. That doesn't bother you. She considered the question, really considered it. It used to, she said. Then I learned what attention costs. He didn't ask more, he didn't need to. Sleep came slowly. When it did, it brought fragments, a different desert, a different heat, the sound of rotors fatting too soon, voices on comms going quiet one by one. She woke before the alarm, breath steady, heart not racing, but heavy. The next morning the base shifted. Not officially, nothing written down, but tone changed. Instructions came faster, corrections sharper. Thorne stopped yelling at everyone equally and focused his attention on her. More drills, longer runs, less rest. She absorbed it without complaint. During a timed endurance march, Raskin pushed past her early, grinning like he'd won something. By mile 8, his stride shortened. By mile 10, he was breathing through his teeth. She passed him without looking sideways. At the finish line, he didn't meet her eyes. The others began to whisper, not jokes now but questions. Where did she learn that grip? Why didn't she ever panic? Why did she never look surprised? Colonel Mathis stood on the observation deck more often. He didn't say much, just watched, took notes he never shared. Her file sat on his desk, thin and unsatisfying. It bothered him more than he liked to admit. Midweek brought combatives integration, controlled sparring, rotations designed to exhaust decision-making. She paired with different opponents, larger ones, faster ones, angry ones. She never humiliated them, never chased dominance. She ended each exchange efficiently and reset, hands loose, breathing calm. Thorne's irritation curdled into something darker. During a break, he pulled one of the lieutenants aside. Raskin. The two spoke quietly. Raskin nodded, jaw set. When sparring resumed, the tempo changed. Her next opponent came in hot. No restraint, no control. He drove her back hard, trying to overwhelm her with sheer pressure. She absorbed it, redirected, took him down. The next one followed immediately. Then another, minimal recovery time. Her breathing deepened. Sweat traced lines down her temples, but her movement stayed precise. Thorne's voice cut through the room, again. She felt it then, the old edge, the line between testing and punishment. She stayed on the right side of it. Afterward, alone near the water station, Raskin approached. He wasn't smiling now. You think you're better than us, he said. She took a sip of water, swallowed, looked at him. No. Then what is this? He gestured vaguely. This whole act. She studied his face, the frustration, the fear buried underneath. This isn't an act, she said quietly. It's restraint. That night she stood outside the barracks, staring at the stars. The sky was brutally clear, no city lights to soften it. She remembered another sky like this. Another night when restraint had meant letting something terrible happen because orders demanded it. She flexed her fingers slowly. Redemption was never loud. It didn't announce itself. It showed up in small choices, in silence, in staying when leaving would be easier. The following day, the notice went up. Special evaluation, mandatory attendance. The gym buzzed with anticipation. This wasn't on the schedule. That alone meant something was about to break. She read the notice once, expression unchanged. Inside, she felt the weight shift. Whatever camouflage she'd been wearing was thinning. And somewhere between suspicion and certainty, the base was preparing to find out whether the quiet woman they'd called a rookie was about to be exposed or finally revealed. Why did the room feel smaller the moment the doors to the gym locked behind them? No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. The air tightened. The usual echoes of laughter and complaint were gone, replaced by the low hum of anticipation and something closer to unease. Special evaluations were never good news. She stood near the back, hands clasped behind her, eyes forward. Her pulse was steady, not calm steady. Calm was fragile, steady was earned. Sergeant Thorne walked to the center of the mat, boots heavy, presence heavier. His voice didn't boom this time. That alone unsettled people. Today isn't about technique, he said. It's about response, about what you do when your plan collapses. A few heads nodded. This was familiar language, controlled chaos, stress inoculation. His eyes found her. And about what you do, he added, when pressure is personal. The words landed where they were meant to. Pairs were assigned, then trios, rotations shortened, recovery vanished. Sweat soaked through shirts and pooled on the mats. People slipped, tempers flared. She moved through it all like a tide working around rocks, never rushing, never freezing. Then Thorne changed it. Clear the mat, he said. The order cut through the noise. Everyone stepped back. Confusion rippled. This wasn't standard. Even Mathis, watching from above, leaned forward slightly. Thorne turned to the lieutenants lined along the wall. Raskin was already straightening, jaw tight, eyes sharp. 5, Thorne said, you're up. A murmur spread before anyone could stop it. 5-on-1 wasn't training. It was theater, a message. Calloway felt his stomach drop. He looked at her expecting something, protest, tension, a flicker of fear. She exhaled once. Stepped forward. Bare feet touched the mat, solid, grounded. She didn't stretch, didn't bounce, just settled her weight and waited. Across from her, the 5 moved into position. Larger, younger, fueled by weeks of resentment, embarrassment, and something dangerously close to permission. Raskin cracked his neck, smiled thinly. This doesn't have to get ugly, he said. She looked at him, not through him this time, at him. It already is, she replied. Thorne raised the whistle. For a brief moment, she felt the old pull, the instinct to end it fast, to remind her body who it used to be without restraint. She let that instinct pass. The whistle blew. Raskin charged first, predictable, anger always volunteered. She didn't retreat, she angled. His momentum carried him where she was. Her hand found the nerve cluster below his ear with surgical precision. His balance vanished. He hit the mat hard, confusion flashing across his face before breath left his lungs. Gasps rippled. 2 more came in immediately, trying to swarm, one high, one low. She dropped her center of gravity, rotated with the strike instead of against it, and used the first attacker as a moving barrier. The second slammed into his teammate, limbs tangling, momentum wasted. Her foot stamped down, controlled, exact, enough to incapacitate without destroying. Another down. The room was silent now, not a sound, not even Thorn. The fourth hesitated. That hesitation cost him. She closed distance, trapped his arm, and redirected his weight into the mat. He rolled, stunned, pain blooming where leverage had spoken instead of force. 4. Only one left. He stood frozen, chest heaving, eyes darting between his fallen teammates and the woman who hadn't even broken rhythm. She met his gaze, saw the fear, the recalculation. She nodded once. An invitation or a warning. He stepped back, hands raised. It was over. Thorn didn't blow the whistle right away. Seconds stretched. The gym felt unreal, like everyone had stepped into a story they didn't know the ending to. Finally, the whistle shrilled. Enough. She straightened slowly, breathing steady, no triumph in her posture, just completion. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Once sharp, uncertain. Then another. The sound spread, not celebratory, not wild, but heavy, respect layered with shame. She didn't look around to receive it. She stepped off the mat. Up in the observation deck, Mathis felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, recognition. He stared at the faded tattoo on her wrist as she reached for her water bottle. The ghost. He'd seen that symbol before, years ago, in a report that didn't officially exist. A unit without insignia, operators without records, missions without acknowledgement. Spectres. His grip tightened on the railing. Below, Thorn stood unmoving, face pale. The system he believed in, the one that had shaped him, had just been dismantled without violence, without noise. By restraint. She walked past him. He didn't stop her. Later, alone in the corridor, Mathis caught up. His voice was quieter than she expected. "Your file," he said, "it's incomplete." She met his eyes, tired now, not physically, something deeper. "It was meant to be," she said. "Why come back?" he asked. "Why here?" She considered that, the easy answer and the true one. "Because some debts don't expire," she said, "and some mistakes don't stay buried." He nodded slowly, understanding more than he could say. That night, as the base settled into uneasy quiet, she lay on her bunk staring at the ceiling. The camouflage was gone now, the ghost exposed. She felt the familiar ache of being seen again. But beneath it, something else stirred. Not pride. Hope. Because sometimes, redemption doesn't come from erasing the past. Sometimes it comes from standing in it, unarmed, unhidden, and choosing one last time to act with dignity instead of rage. Why did she hesitate before stepping onto the range the next morning, when nothing on the schedule suggested danger? It wasn't fear. It was memory. The gym had changed something, not just how they looked at her, but how they spoke around her. Voices dropped when she passed. Jokes stopped mid-sentence. Respect had arrived, awkward and unsure of where to stand. She disliked it more than the ridicule. On the range, the wind cut across the sand in low, restless sheets. Targets stood at distance, unmoving, indifferent. This was supposed to be routine, familiar, clean. Yet her hand paused on the rifle. The smell of oil and metal brought something old to the surface. A different range, a different country, a shot she hadn't taken soon enough, and one she'd taken too late. She closed her eyes for half a breath. Then she lifted the weapon. "Shooter ready," the range officer called. She settled into position, her body aligning without conscious effort. The world narrowed, wind, distance, breath. Her first shot landed dead center. The second followed, then the third. Too clean. She adjusted, not the rifle but herself. Let one round drift just enough to look human. Still, the murmurs started. Mathis watched through binoculars, saying nothing. He didn't need numbers anymore. He watched how she reset after each shot, how she didn't chase perfection, how she knew exactly where her limits were and stayed just inside them. After the range came the debrief. No applause, no confrontation, just a quiet acknowledgement that the ground beneath the program had shifted. That afternoon, she was called into Mathis's office. The door closed softly behind her. He gestured to the chair. She remained standing. "Your choice," he said. She stayed where she was. "I confirmed the symbol," he said. "Unofficial channels, old ones." She didn't respond. "You disappeared," he continued. "No discharge, no death, just absence." "Yes. Why let them think you were nothing?" Her eyes finally met his. There was no anger there, only truth worn smooth. "Because being something gets people killed," she said. "Being nothing keeps them alive." He absorbed that in silence. "Thorne crossed a line," Mathis said finally. "Yesterday." She shook her head once. "No," he revealed one. A faint, reluctant smile touched his face. "You don't want command," he said. "It wasn't a question." "No." "You don't want recognition." "No." "Then what do you want?" She thought of the faces that visited her at night, the ones that never aged. "I want to finish something," she said, "without shortcuts." He nodded slowly. "There's a mission coming, high risk, plausible deniability, the kind that never makes sense on paper." Her shoulders eased a fraction. "I know the kind. We weren't planning to offer it to you." "I know." A beat passed. "I'm offering it now." She didn't answer immediately. Acceptance wasn't automatic anymore. It came with weight. "I don't lead teams," she said. "I support them quietly." Mathis leaned back. "That may be exactly what they need." That night she packed her kit with the same care she always had. Nothing extra, nothing missing. Calloway hovered nearby, unsure. "They're saying you're a legend," he said. She paused, then continued folding a shirt. "Legends are stories people tell when they don't want to learn the lesson," she said. He nodded, not fully understanding, but feeling it. As lights dimmed, she lay back and stared into the dark. The past pressed close now, no longer content to stay buried. She felt the old fear, not of dying, but of surviving when others didn't. The mission briefing came at dawn. Maps, timelines, faces she didn't recognize yet. As she studied the terrain, a quiet resolve settled in her chest. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about balance, about doing the work without letting it hollow her out again. Outside, the desert wind rose, carrying sand across the base like a slow erasure. She stood, shouldered her pack, and walked toward the waiting aircraft. Not as a rookie, not as a ghost, but as someone who understood that strength isn't measured by how many fights you win. Sometimes it's measured by how many you choose not to fight and still stand ready when it matters most. Why did she close her eyes when the aircraft lifted off, as if she were counting something she couldn't afford to misplace? The engines roared, vibration crawling through the metal floor, but she wasn't listening to that. She was listening inward, to breath, to weight, to the quiet checklist she never wrote down anymore. This was the point of no return. It always was. Across from her, the team sat strapped in, faces half hidden under helmets and night vision mounts. 4 of them, chosen quickly, not the loudest, not the most decorated, the ones who watched instead of talked. They didn't ask her questions, not yet. She wasn't officially in charge. On paper, Lieutenant Harris held that role. He was competent, careful. He'd read every brief twice. But when turbulence shook the aircraft and the lights flickered for a fraction of a second, his eyes drifted to her without meaning to. She noticed. She gave him a single nod, nothing more. The mission was simple in structure and brutal in reality. A recovery, A location that shouldn't exist on any map, assets compromised, time running thin, the kind of operation where the wrong decision didn't just fail, it echoed. As the aircraft leveled out, Harris leaned closer, raised his voice just enough to be heard over the engines. "If this goes sideways," he said, "I want your read, no filters." She looked at him, really looked. "Then you'll get it," she said. That was all. The insertion point was cold. Wind cut sharp against exposed skin. The ground rushed up, dark and uneven. They moved fast, not rushed, fast the way experience moved when panic stayed behind. She took rear security by default, always had, not because she lacked confidence, but because she trusted her awareness more when watching what others missed. They reached the structure without resistance, too easily. That was the first wrong note. Inside, the air smelled stale, old oil, fear that had soaked into concrete and never left. Her pulse ticked up, not in alarm but in recognition. She raised a hand, the team froze. Harris looked back at her, questioning. She tilted her head slightly, listening. There, a pause where sound should have been, a gap. "Left corridor," she whispered, "not empty." They adjusted. The ambush came seconds later, poorly coordinated, desperate, people who'd lost control of the situation and were trying to reclaim it with noise. She didn't fire immediately. She moved. Her world narrowed to angles and momentum, to bodies moving through space with intention or without it. She put herself where she needed to be, not where the fight was loudest, but where it would end fastest. A hand reached for Harris from behind. She intercepted it without thought. A twist, a drop, no theatrics. The team flowed with her adjustments instinctively now. No confusion, no questions. When it was over, the silence felt heavier than the gunfire had. They found what they came for, barely alive, shaken, still breathing. Extraction was delayed. Of course it was. They hunkered down, perimeter tight, minutes stretching thin. Someone cursed softly. Someone else laughed once, sharp and brittle. She checked the wounded asset, movements gentle, human, not tactical. Harris crouched beside her. "You've done this exact thing before," he said quietly. She didn't deny it. "Did it ever get easier?" he asked. She met his eyes. There was no comfort to give him that wouldn't be a lie. "No," she said, "but you get better at carrying it." The weight stretched, radio static, no clear answers. She felt the familiar weight settle in her chest, the one that came when responsibility narrowed to a single outcome. If this failed, it wouldn't be the program that paid for it. It would be faces. When extraction finally came, it was violent and rushed, dust and noise and urgency. They moved as one, muscle memory overriding fatigue. On the ride back, no one spoke. Back at base, dawn broke pale and colorless. She stepped off the aircraft and felt the ground solid under her boots. Alive. That mattered. Mathis waited near the hangar. His face told her everything before he spoke. "Command wants to know who you are," he said. She nodded slowly. She known this moment would come. "And?" she asked. "I told them the truth," he said, "that you're not theirs to own." Something loosened in her chest at that. "They'll push," he added. "They always do." He studied her. "You could disappear again." "Yes. But you won't." She didn't answer right away. "I spent a long time being a ghost," she said finally. "It kept people safe, until it didn't." He waited. "I don't want to vanish anymore," she said. "I want to choose when I stay." That afternoon, she walked the perimeter alone, watched the younger soldiers train, watched mistakes happen and get corrected. Calloway spotted her and jogged over. "They're saying the mission succeeded because of you," he said. She shook her head. "It succeeded because no one panicked." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like you." She looked out across the base. The dust, the noise, the quiet resolve beneath it all. "I won't be here forever," she said. "I know," he replied. "But while I am," she continued, "I'll teach what I can." He nodded, serious now. That night she sat on the edge of her bunk, gear stowed, hands resting on her knees. The ache in her body was deep, but clean. She thought of the woman she'd been, the one who disappeared without goodbye. She thought of the one she was becoming now. Still quiet, still restrained, but no longer hiding. Sometimes redemption isn't loud. It doesn't come with forgiveness or ceremony. Sometimes it arrives quietly, when you stop running from what you survived and decide at last to stand where you are and be counted. Why did she pause at the doorway when everyone else moved forward, as if crossing it meant deciding something she'd been avoiding for years? The room beyond was ordinary, too ordinary for the weight it carried. Rows of chairs, a projector humming softly, coffee cooling on a side table. It looked like every other after-action room she'd ever seen. And that was the problem. Ordinary rooms were where decisions got buried, where language softened consequences until they sounded survivable. She stepped inside anyway. The team was already seated. Harris nodded to her. Calloway sat straighter when he saw her, like posture alone might signal respect. Mathis stood near the wall, arms folded, watching without interfering. Command appeared on the screen, faces framed by distance and authority, voices calm, polished. They spoke of success, of metrics, of lessons learned. They spoke around her. Finally, one of them leaned forward. "Specialist Vance," he said, "your contribution exceeded expectations." She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the beginning of a box being built. "Thank you," she replied, neutral. "We'd like to formalize your role," another voice said. "Advisory, training, select operations." The words were careful, attractive, dangerous. She listened without interrupting, let them finish. When they were done, the room waited. She took a breath, not deep, not dramatic, just enough. "I won't be formalized," she said. Silence. The man frowned slightly. "This isn't a refusal, it's an opportunity." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm refusing." Murmurs, a glance exchanged off-screen. "You've proven your value," the voice pressed. "Why limit your impact?" She looked at the faces in the room instead of the screen, at the young soldiers, at the ones still learning where their edges were. "Because impact isn't always about reach," she said. "Sometimes it's about restraint." They didn't like that answer. She hadn't expected them to. "I'll stay," she continued. "For a while I'll train. I'll advise when asked. But I won't belong to another shadow with a longer leash." A pause. Mathis watched her closely now. Finally, the voice on the screen said, "And when we need you." She didn't hesitate this time. "You won't need to ask," she said. "You'll know." The screen went dark. No applause, no argument. Just space. Later outside, the sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the training ground. She walked slowly, letting the evening settle around her. The base sounded different now, less hostile, less expectant. She passed the gym. For a moment she stood in the doorway watching recruits move across the mats. Sloppy, earnest, alive. Thorne stood off to the side, quieter than she remembered him. When he noticed her, he nodded, not as an instructor, as a man who'd learned something expensive. She nodded back. Calloway jogged up, breathless. "They're saying you turned down command." She smiled faintly. "I turned down ownership." He thought about that. "What happens now?" he asked. She looked out at the horizon, where the desert softened into dusk. "Now," she said, "you keep training, you keep questioning. You don't confuse volume with strength." "And you?" She considered the question. "I stay long enough to make myself unnecessary," she said. That night she packed again, but slower this time. No urgency, no escape plan, just readiness. She sat on her bunk, holding the faded tag she always carried. Names etched deep, people who never got to choose how they were remembered. "I didn't forget you," she whispered, not in apology, not in grief, but in acknowledgement. When sleep came, it was gentler than usual. Morning brought wind and light. She stood outside as the base woke up, breathing in dust and sun. Someone called her name, not sharply, not casually. Respectfully, she turned. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the need to disappear. She walked forward instead. Because sometimes, dignity doesn't announce itself with force or fury. Sometimes dignity survives quietly, in the choices you make when no one is watching, in the strength to act without being seen, and in the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. They had called her a rookie. They had mistaken silence for weakness. But in the end, they learned what she had always known. Strength doesn't need permission. It doesn't need applause. Sometimes it simply acts and lets the truth follow behind it.